Welcome to God with George Ortega and Joshua Bond. This is episode number 8. We're recording it on Thursday, October 29th, 2020 at about 4:17 p.m. Eastern Time. So Joshua, start us off. We've just gone through 5 episodes just demonstrating that God isn't just a belief. You don't have to rely on faith to understand that God exists. God logically, by necessity, must exist if you're defining God the way the Bible defines God. So, all right. So, Joshua, where do we want to go from there?
Yeah, so we went over all the attributes, all of the omnipresence and omniscience, and starting out with God being the creator and God being everything, and talked about theism, deism, panpsychism, and how those might be, the best we can conceptualize, but a little more divisive than is necessary, And I think the panpsychist view, if you're going to say God is the creator and God is everything, it's been a challenge for me to accept the panpsychist view or integrate it into my spirituality as much as I kind of feel it is useful. So from there, we left off with talking about how in Judaism and all of the religions, most of the religions, some interesting things happened, right? And so um, you could say almost that Jesus and Buddha were born at the same time, not the same time chronologically, but the same thing was going on in the major religions at this time they were born. And what that was is essentially in Judaism, there was the Sadducees that believed that man has free will, and if man does wrong, then that just means man's sinning. And, this is why man deserves to go to hell. On the other end, you had the Essenes. Now, most people don't even know about the Essenes. They know about the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but the Essenes are very important. For instance, you probably have heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? And they're believed to be the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but you never hear their actual name, right? The Essenes believe more aligned with what modern science tells us, that free will is an illusion. We have this perception of free will that's just not accurate. And there's hundreds and thousands of psychological experiments that are proven this out. This is the whole point of biology and chemistry and physiology, right? So in the middle there, you have the Pharisees, right? So the Essenes want to know what is the essential nature of reality, what is the essence of reality. The Sadducees, they want to just enforce these rules and kind of dogma, and if you don't meet their criteria, it's your fault. And in the middle, you have the Pharisees, and they wanted to be fair, not fair to the science, not fair to logic of looking at nature and realizing we're part of nature, but fair to this egoic desire to kind of enforce rules and the ego wanting to believe it has more free will than it does, and fair between the other end of the spectrum, the Essenes, and realizing, hey, we're part of nature and we realize we don't know everything, and our free will is not what it seems, right? And so this is when Jesus was born, and we have the most record of this divisive split between Judaism. And just like when Buddha was born, the exact same thing was going on in Hinduism. Most people can recognize it from the fact that just like the Essenes were getting into more mystical practices and experimentation with how to control consciousness or experiment with consciousness, there was all these decadent practices of ritual and stuff that I would call woo, or at least used to. I have more respect for it now in Hinduism. And Hinduism was split, and on the other side, it was this very legalistic approach to religion, right? And so you see this in all the religions, and even Christianity and Buddhism, after went through this same cycle of having this revelation and trying to reconcile and integrate this split in the religions. And I think it worked for a while, but then it became split again. And so Christianity split again, Buddhism split again, and we see the same thing in Islam. So I think this awareness that we're coming into with all of this is realizing what's going on here under the surface is, as humans, we're trying to have the best possible lives we can, be able to be in control of ourselves as much as we can so we can love each other and reach our potential, not cause unnecessary conflict and suffering to ourselves, to each other on the planet. And we don't have free will like we want to believe. So it's been, it's been very hard. And I think George and I are going to walk us through how we can integrate, because there is value in all of these trains of thought, right? We need to have rules, we need to have a logic, we need to have rationale, and things to aspire to, but we need to also have grace and realize that just because it's written down in a book, written down in the law, whatever, doesn't mean the human mind can automatically make the whole nervous system completely shift and follow that law, right? What's your thoughts on that so far, George?
Yeah, all right. First, I want to reiterate what you were saying about the Essenes, that they were the one sect around the time of the turn of the first millennium that understood that if God is omnipotent, if God is eternal, if God is everything, if God is omniscient, there's absolutely no way that we can have a free will. So they attributed everything that we do to God. It's the correct view. Again, science is bearing them out now. About this scenes, there was a historian, Josephus, a Jewish historian around that time, that actually considered the Essenes the most pious of the three major sects. They were the smallest because they were celibate. They had to recruit new members. It's not like they could, their kids could be, Essenes also. So, but they were the most pious. And, there's actually evidence, since the teachings of Jesus have a good amount in common with the teachings of the Essenes, there's good evidence that Jesus may have that Jesus may have actually been an Essene before Christianity. And naturally, Jesus considered himself a Jew throughout his entire lifetime. It's not until Paul, basically created the new religion that this rift, because otherwise we could actually see Christianity as a sect of Judaism. But again, it's the point is that the like grace, some of at the time the Pharisees, who were the dominant sect, were way too concerned with the legalities. They were ignoring the poor. They were ignoring the spirit of the law. What the Torah was saying about poverty, about loving thy neighbor and stuff. So Jesus emphasized that, and the Essenes were like that. So yeah, and so yes, I think even now in Judaism. I mean, I study with two sects of Judaism now, three actually. But when we study Talmud and Torah, it's still overly legalistic. In other words, right now we're in the midst of a pandemic where we should be studying how to summon up our morality, how to summon up our resilience, our happiness, our compassion for each other, our responsibility. We should be studying those passages of the Torah that deal explicitly with that. Whereas with a lot of I attend two Talmud classes, and they're just going along, one tractate of this Talmud, and without regard to what they're studying. In other words, it's kind of in the midst. Actually, this is something a long time ago, the Jews would respect the Sabbath. They wouldn't work and they wouldn't fight on the Sabbath, right? And so what happened was the enemies, got wind of it, and the enemies would attack the Jews on the Sabbath. And naturally, the Jews back then would get decimated. So finally they came around, well, the Sabbath, this law of not fighting on the Sabbath is good, but it's better that we, stay alive, to fight another day, whatever. So we're in a similar kind of a situation. Judaism, not just Judaism, Christianity, I think also, we need these religions of today to move from this tradition of just let's just study this tractate of the Bible through the entire year and ignore what's going on, especially today that so much is going on. It needs to be much more relevant. So, but basically, I think what we're both saying is that religion needs to evolve. It needs to evolve first from this prophecy-based foundation where like people said something a long time ago and we believe it because they say it. Two, let's reason it out. Does it make sense? Is the world flat? Was the world created 6,000 years ago? Does the sun revolve around the earth or the earth around the sun? So that I think that needs to be a very strong foundation of the basis of our future religions moving forward.
Certainly, George. And so this episode is about God, and it's about spirituality, how to know God, how to have a relationship with God, and we're going to challenge a lot of the religious beliefs and religious practices. I don't think that we're necessarily insulting or belittling any certain scriptural texts. You also have to realize that it's not so much how what the words say or how it was interpreted or how it was reinterpreted many, many, many times. It's how we've come to understand it and practice it and relate to it. And I think that has had some major flaws, right? And the subjective experience of any law, any reason, any rationale can be different. The exact same words can be interpreted differently. So we could imagine another universe, there may be another multiverse that's practicing Christianity and Judaism very differently than we are. Who knows? And I think that we need to appreciate this and give ourselves some grace and, approach the spiritual topic from a way that has a higher rate of success than it has, right? Because these religions have been at it for thousands and thousands of years, and we still have a high rate of crime, high rate of poverty, high rate of suffering, high rate of self-hate, high rate of mental illnesses skyrocketing most of the West. And I think that it's hard to keep this all in mind, that we are talking about God. Most of us know of God, or our relationship with God has been defined by religion, and they've kind of dominated it. And I have high respect, and I think we need to not forsake religion, and not, because religion is how we practice spirituality together, and that's very important. I just think that we're going to introduce some ideas, and we already have been, that will help religion be more successful.
Okay, I want to make 2 points. Yeah, relative to like our rates of crime and poverty, yes, they're unacceptably high, but on the other hand, they're much lower than 100 years ago, 400 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Like, people are living longer, living more healthy. There's less violence in the world, less wars. So religion has done a world of good. But now, we can't stop there, because the case can be made that this generation, these last several generations, are the most evil ever on the planet. And I'm not referring to how we humans treat each other. God in the Bible, this is again, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, God commands us to be good, not just to ourselves and each other, but to animals, to the animals we share this planet with. And so like today we have over 80 billion farm animals, being systematically, institutionally abused, tortured in many cases every day. Well, I mean 80 billion a year, in complete disregard of this commandment to be kind to animals. And this is like, and what's bewildering is like, why do religions need to change? Because Judaism isn't talking about this, neither is Christianity or Islam. I mean, there may be a few clerics that might write a little about it, but you don't hear it. It's not part of who these religions are. So like, your point is like, yes, we have a long way to go, and this is what God wants. And this coronavirus, it's probably not an accident that the coronavirus, the record wildfires, California, all throughout the United States, the record hurricanes, this is probably, and it seems like we're headed for a market crash. Who knows? But this is not an accident. God is trying to get our attention, and we need to listen to what God wants.
Certainly, I think that comes back to, God is everything. And if we don't appreciate that, then, we still have the majority of people in this country claiming to believe in God. But if we don't have this concept of God as everything and trying to teach us from everything, then we also have the majority of people having the spiritual practice and belief in God that's out of touch with reality, right? And I think, just like with the animals, just like with, just like with the incarceration rate, we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. The USA has the most people in prison in cages, right? So, like you were saying, we have made a lot of progress. There's been, a lot of study on we are becoming less violent of a species, but at the same time, we have these other aspects where we're not making progress that's very related. And I think it really comes down to people being able to love themselves um, in a true, authentic way so that they can love each other as well. And it seems to be, whether it's treating animals in a certain way or treating your children or treating your neighbor, we can't assume, the problem has been assuming that if I just say, treat your neighbor good, stay married, don't get divorced, whatever it is, some rule that we can just say, that's what's best, you need to do it, you're going to be able to make yourself do it. And that's complete nonsense. That's not how, human nature works. And I think the scriptural texts are very clear on it. It's just that this part of the scriptural text and truth have been downplayed and misinterpreted. One thing that I think is important for people to understand is that, religion evolved out of culture. So religion is like a culture. And if you think of evolutionarily speaking, if you want to look at evolution or you just want to look at it from studying, sociology, animals and humans as well, when people are made to feel shame, what happens is they repress that part of themselves, right? And it goes into the subconscious and unconscious, and it causes a lot of turmoil in the unconscious and the psyche. And that almost always has to come out. And it certainly affects, even if it doesn't come out explicitly, it affects our ability to have relationships and to love ourselves. Most of psychology calls this shadow projection, right? And so if you take the Sadducee way of writing these rules down and just saying, this is the truth, if you don't follow them, you deserve to go to hell, and we need to shame you into conformity, and just more shame and more shame and more shame, then these parts are getting repressed and it's projection. And where psychology gets it wrong, a lot of psychology, is to look at projection as a wrong thing, right? What's really going on is, we're shaming people into conformity over rules that aren't necessarily true, or teaching them that parts of themselves are evil when they're human beings. They have a right to be here, and we all share these aspects of consciousness, right? And so if we view people lashing out at us or anger or projection, I mean, I'm guilty as anybody. I lose my temper, I get mad and say things I don't want to. But, when I accept that everyone on the planet is going through that same thing, I realize it's not just me. These are human issues. And I accept that part of myself and I say, what is God trying to teach me about, shame that's been put on me that I repressed, and now I'm lashing out at people. And I think that's the way to solve most of, not all of these problems, because the studies have showed that the recidivism rate of returning to prison after you're let out, if the prison system is treating you in this way, right, that many parents treat their children because that's how they were treated and they don't know better, or this is how people are treating farm animals because they were treated that way as well, then the recidivism rate, the crime rate doesn't go down compared to countries who are treating prisoners like they're still human and still need relational connections and need to talk through things and resolve psychic tension. And I think that's what religion was always designed to be originally, and we've just gotten off track lately. And I'm hoping that's what we're working to resolve with this show in part.
All right, I'm glad you brought up the subject of shame because it's extremely important, because it's tied with another psychological concept called denial. And here's where our proper understanding of God comes in. Basically, we feel ashamed because we don't understand or accept that God is omnipotent, that God is the only power in the universe, that whatever we do, it's because God is compelling us. And because we don't understand and accept this, when we do things wrong, as we do because we're human, we blame ourselves, and that causes us to feel shame. Naturally, sometimes we don't want to feel shame because it hurts. So what do? We resort to denial. Like we don't want to feel the pain of indicting us. We believe in free will, and we know that we're abusing, horribly torturing these animals. We can't accept that fact. So what do? We deny it's happening. We deny that, we say, oh, these animals can't feel pain, or we invent reasons, or we just refuse to look at it. Again, this is like derived from our feeling shame, trying to avoid shame that's caused by the free will belief by denying what we're doing. We're doing the same thing with climate change. We understand that what we're doing is endangering civilization. And many people can't, because they blame themselves, because they believe they have a free will. They can't accept that they and their family and their friends can be acting so irresponsibly, so they deny climate change. They say, oh, it can't be that serious, it can't be that important, we can't be causing it. So shame is the central problem that's causing us to go into denial about issues that are very important, not just to today, but to tomorrow. And again, this really stems from our refusing to appreciate that God being sovereign, God being omnipotent, all powerful, means that everything that we do is up to God. And the synagogues, churches, mosques are not addressing this. This has to be a major transformation in our world if we're going to evolve beyond shame and take responsibility, and do what we need to do going forward.
Sure, George, and many, if not most, if not all, even psychologists realize that shame is the cause of many of the mental disorders, as well as depression and anxiety, the ones that we all face. And I think that part of this is, I don't want this message that we're giving to just cause more shame. Part of this is an enlightenment to realize what consciousness is, and it's not what religions of past have thought. We're getting some of what they discovered is true and valid and very useful, but we have to keep building on that, and we have to realize that just like with those issues you brought up, with those issues you brought up, and comparing that to the pandemic right now, look at how many people were in denial about there even being possibility for a pandemic when we have many instances in recent history, right? Until they got sick or one of their family members got sick. Trump, for instance, right, completely changed courses. And we see this, and what that means is, what's happening to farm animals or the planet or prisoners or wars that, if we don't have a son or daughter in that war, we aren't so connected to them. Consciousness evolved, in a way for our survival with what's around us, what's happening around us, and our ability to connect and relate to that. And so, from the Sadducee perspective of just making laws and rules and having expectations of people without, having, news media or documentaries or some form of, even service where you go volunteer at, a prison or a mental hospital or, to veterans or whatever it is, you shouldn't expect yourself to be able, it doesn't help to just judge yourself and condemn yourself more. And I think that's kind of where we missed the boat on, especially religions, because, our religious institutions have done such a fantastic job at volunteering and feeding the homeless, for instance. But when it comes to these other issues, they haven't. And I harp on myself for this because I haven't been able to engage in some of the public service opportunities like I've heard you talk about that you've done even in your own life. And I've recognized what a struggle it is if I don't have friends to go do that with. I almost need that support system. So that's just some thoughts that came to mind of how to tie all this together, of God, spirituality, these moral issues, and what some people have called wicked problems that we now face because they're global and they're huge. They're not like the original problems that the tribal religions just had amongst themselves.
I don't know if you can hear me. You cut out. Your screen is frozen, but we'll go on. Josh, I don't know if you can hear me. So yeah, let me just follow up on what you were saying. I think your screen is fine now. All right. Yes, you raised a very important point. You know, when I was just talking about like shame and how we refuse to understand that God is all powerful and we're being so horrible, so evil, you know, you bring up the point that like I don't intend to shame people. In other words, I prefer that you don't feel any pain at all by what I'm saying, because like, basically what I'm trying to like evoke, I think what we're trying to evoke from you is not the pain of shame, not feeling bad about yourself. Because again, neither Josh nor I are blaming you for anything. We're attributing everything, both the good and the bad, to God. But what we're trying to do is awaken your conscience, is to look at what's happening to those animals, look what's happening to the climate, not just to awaken your conscience, but to awaken you to the fact that it's not just that God is all powerful, it's that God judges us, that in our world, and this may not seem fair, it doesn't seem all that fair to me, but like what happens is God often, causes us to do good and God rewards us. We don't have any problem with that, because who's going to object to a reward? But then God also makes us do evil, sometimes horrendous evil, and then punishes us. So in other words, like if we want to preserve this world of so many blessings that so many of us have, we need to understand this. We need to stop abusing animals. We need to stop incarcerating so many people. We need to stop, keeping people poor so we can get products at cheaper prices. We need to stop ignoring the rights and welfare of our children and grandchildren with climate change, and do this, again, not with a sense of shame, but with the idea that, for our own good as well as theirs, because God rewards and punishes. All right, Josh, there's about 1:12 left. Close out the show.
All right. Well, we don't script these shows. This is a open and honest conversation, and that's what makes it fun. And I'm looking forward to getting into the other aspects of this, of not just the morality part, but the hedonics and the happiness, and how all of this meshes together to create lifestyles and techniques, whether it be from religions from other countries, entertainment, all forms of entertainment, submersive media, virtual reality, augmented reality, everything that we do for fun, almost all of our hobbies, are greatly empowered when we realize that they are all spiritual practices for total mind, body, energetic wholeness. And once we figure that out and master those, a lot of this morality issues will fall in line, because people will be less depressed, less anxious, they will be more accepting of themselves and more actualized. And I am really looking forward to talking about that, and I'm really appreciative for George for starting this platform for us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.